Welcome to Cannabis Health Radio, a podcast where we share stories from people around the world who are using cannabis as medicine. The information is meant to raise awareness about the health benefits of cannabis, but should not be taken as medical advice. Now, here are your hosts, Ian Jessup and Corey Yelland.
Welcome to episode 229 of Cannabis Health Radio. I'm Ian Jessup.
And I'm Corey Yelland.
Do you like our new intro, Corey?
I do.
Yeah, it's great. Our guest today is Leslie. She doesn't want her last name used, and she is from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and she's going to tell us two stories about the benefits of cannabis. One story deals with her mother, and the other with her personally. Leslie, thanks for doing this.
Oh, my pleasure.
Now, you suffer from PTSD because you were kidnapped, held at knife point for 6 days, terrorized, and beaten. Now, take us through what happened. And I should remind you, Leslie, that if at any point you want to stop, just let us know and we'll move on.
Okay, sure. I had met a man, and within a month, he had charmed me into thinking that he would be the man I was going to potentially marry. And within a few months of being with him, he slowly became emotionally aggressive and abusive in ways that were shocking me and getting me off balance, and then of course apologizing and saying he needed help. And so I thought that if I stuck by him a little while and did some things with him to help him, it might change things, but it didn't. It just went sour within, I think it was about 6 months when that happened. We traveled to South America, and we were in the Amazon jungle doing some healing work with a shaman. And we were supposed to be there for 4 weeks, and on the third week he just snapped and attacked me and took a knife and put it in my face. Told me to give up my passport, my credit cards, my money. So that was it. In that moment, I was stuck. And then over the next 6 days, it was just terrorism and him beating me and holding the knife in my face and acting like a lunatic. But fortunately, he became paranoid of the townspeople coming after him. So he allowed me to get our flights changed, and we came back to Toronto. And that's when I started taking action to separate myself from him. And eventually he went away with the help of the police. So I survived it. I wasn't sure if I was going to make it. I mean, in the moment when it first happened, the first night it happened, I was pretty sure he was going to kill me. And the amount of fear that I experienced, it felt like the most amount of fear a human being could ever experience. And then that feeling was with me for the whole 6 days. And even after I came back, it was with me until I called the police. And then everything stopped from there. Like, he stayed away. But since then, that was 10 years ago. Since then, it was the road to recovery. I'd also lost quite a bit of weight. I hadn't been eating. He'd been keeping me from eating meat, insisting I should stay on a raw food diet. And so my body was falling apart from the malnutrition in addition to the stress. So it was a road to recovery after that. And I'm doing pretty good. I'm very physically fit and health conscious. So I was able to make a full physical recovery, but the PTSD symptoms, they stay with you for a long time, or they stayed with me for a long time. And while I can appear to everybody in my life that I'm highly functioning, I still have a lot of anxiety. I was having a lot of nightmares, lose my patience very, very fast, get angry very fast for, no good reason sometimes. Mostly with my family, outside of the family, not so bad, but within the family where it feels a little safer. So 3 years ago, I think it was about 3 years ago, a friend of mine sent me a link to the Rick Simpson story and this story of how cannabis oil heals cancer. And I'd never heard of that before. I know about cannabis because I had smoked cannabis off and on through my life. But sometimes I didn't because it would make me a little paranoid. So I got scared and would stop for some time. But then when I had this story and I listened to it, I was blown away. And then I found Corey's story, the interview with Cannabis Health Radio, and that blew me away too. And my friend told me he knew someone who had the oil. So I got some oil from this friend, and I got extra because I had a friend with cancer, and I had a couple of other friends that were having health issues, and they were interested. So I started getting this oil, and I started microdosing with it. And for me, it literally changed my life. My sister said she's noticed a huge improvement since I've taken the oil in terms of my mood swings and my mental states. And so I've been taking the oil every night for the last 3 years, and it's worked great for me. No more nightmares.
I was just going to ask you if you still had nightmares.
Very, very rarely, maybe once a year. If I'm in a very stressful situation, then that can trigger them, but that's pretty rare.
What was
but if I don't take the oil, if I don't take the oil, then I do start having trouble. I can't sleep. That's the other thing. The oil has helped me sleep better than I've ever slept.
Wow. So what was the first thing you noticed when you started taking it, Leslie?
The first time I took it, I just remember feeling like getting drowsy and sleeping pretty deep. Felt a little groggy in the morning when I got up, but that wasn't a problem. After about a week or two of taking it, I would wake up feeling a little groggy, but once I got up and took a shower and got moving, that wore off completely, and I was fine for my day.
Now, so do you find that just taking it at night actually is enough to, keep the PTSD in check for 24 hours, sort of thing? Or do you have to? Do you find that you smoke some during the day, or?
Yeah, during the day, what I ended up doing was starting to smoke at the end of day when I'm finished work, and then I wait till 2 hours before I go to bed for the oil. However, because I'm a little bit nervous about having cannabis when I'm working, not because my work is great, I can work fine, but I start forgetting things like, did I do this? Did I do that?
Right.
So I just wait till I'm finished work. Although one time I had a really bad migraine and I had a full day, and I was about 3/4 of the way through the day, and I thought I didn't think I was going to make it. So I thought, well, hell, I'm just going to take the oil. And if I get stoned, I don't care. I just want to kill this headache because it's also good for pain. So I took a little bit of the oil, just a very tiny half a grain of rice. And surprisingly, I didn't get stoned at all. It leveled me to the place of the headache went away completely. And my energy level was perfect. I was perfectly relaxed and centered and ready to work. So I find the oil in the daytime works like any kind of medicine, depending on where your body is. Like if you're too high, it can bring you down. If you're too low, it can bring you up a little. It just depends what's going on. But it's an amazing medicine.
So the oil you're taking is high THC?
Yes,
Okay.
it's made the way Rick Simpson formula is supposed to be made. Yeah, and I've started making my own too.
Bravo.
Good for you.
Yeah.
Leslie, after the incident, did the doctors recommend anything for you, any pharmaceuticals?
I don't remember if I even went to the doctor. I did go to my doctor and I told him what happened. Actually, I'm remembering now. I did go to my doctor and I told him what happened, and he did recommend pharmaceuticals if I wanted them. He was never pushy. I had an amazing doctor, but he's since retired. He always respected my wishes to use alternative medicine, but he never judged me. He would listen, and he would never criticize it. And he just said, because I'm so healthy, he would say, whatever you're doing, just keep doing it.
Where do you think you would be? Where do you think your mental state would be today if you had not discovered cannabis oil?
I wouldn't be in as good shape for sure. I still would be having trouble sleeping. I would probably be extremely anxious and much angrier than I am. Tense. I'd probably still be having nightmares. And I think that's how I would be if I wasn't taking the oil, because that's how I was before. I started taking the oil. I did do a therapy some years ago, about 5 years ago, called EMDR, which did help. Yeah, it helped for a while, but after about a year or two of that, then I started slipping back into my symptoms, so it only had a short-term effect.
Tell us what EMDR is.
It's a kind of therapy called eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, and basically there's different ways of doing it. There's something called tapping. It's a bilateral eye movement stimulation. So the therapist will work with you, a psychotherapist who's trained in this work will work to, and you don't have to tell the story of what you went through, because sometimes that can be re-traumatizing to tell the story. Because your brain gets tricked into thinking you're there again when you talk about it, or when I talk about it. So what they do is they just have you imagine the worst moment in the situation, and then you open your eyes and they'll wave their finger back and forth, and you watch with your eyes. So your eyes are moving back and forth. And then you relax and close your eyes, and then you tell the therapist what's coming up for you, and then you go through. You close your eyes again, and you look at the finger, or you open your eyes and look at the finger waving back and forth. So there's a bilateral movement going on with the eyes that stimulates. I think it's called REM state, and it helps the brain, the neural pathways in the brain reconfigure into a different pattern and out of the pattern of the trauma. Because in trauma, the brain, the neural pathways in the brain, they get reconfigured into a state. So the PTSD is actually a state of feeling like you're still in the trauma and in the situation, because the brain has rewired to into that story.
Now, when you flew back from South America with this odd fellow that you were with, you must have felt as though something may happen to you during your trip back and when you arrived in Toronto. Am I correct?
Yes, I was feeling under threat every moment I was with him after that situation started.
I can't even imagine. And you were all those miles from home when it happened, too.
It was horrible. Yeah, I just thought, oh my goodness, my parents don't even know where I am, and I don't want to die this way. I don't want to die here in the jungle, It was horrible. But I just hung on, with my mind. I was just tried to be really strong.
One of the things we talked about the other day when we were on the phone is this strain of cannabis called Golden Goat, and you were going to check with your caregiver, provider, whatever. Were you able to do that yet?
I ran it by him, and he said he hadn't heard of it, but he's looking into it now.
Okay, I know you can get it in the States. So for listeners, Golden Goat is very, very effective with PTSD. Even simply adding some to laundry detergent and washing clothes in it and your pillowcases, etc., is having amazing results with post-traumatic stress disorder.
Golden Goat.
Golden Goat.
Cool. Golden Goat. I have to get some of that. Yeah. I'm looking forward to finding that one.
Leslie, we talked in the introduction that you had two stories. One was about yourself, which you just told us, and the next one is about your mother. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, my sister and I, a little over a year ago, my mother had been complaining she hadn't been on a vacation for a few years. So we took my parents to the Dominican Republic. And on the plane ride on the way down, we brought some food, and none of us had eaten much. So we were pulling out the sandwiches, and we offered her some food, and she said she wasn't hungry. She had a stomach ache. She didn't feel like eating. And then over the course of the week that we were there, she didn't want to eat hardly anything or even drink water. Everything tasted horrid to her. So we were really concerned because we thought, well, how long has this been going on? And apparently it had been going on at least a month, maybe longer. And it was really nerve-wracking because we thought, well, how long can she get away with this? This is not right. Something's wrong. So when we came back, we went to the hospital right away and get her checked out, and they put her through tests, and everything was fine. They said she was slightly dehydrated, so they hydrated her, and we took her home, and they gave her some kind of medication, some kind of anti-nausea medication that they give cancer people, and they thought she had a gastric problem. So we gave it to her. And over the course of the next few days, she stopped eating and drinking completely. And three days went by. And that's when I got in touch. I think I got in touch with you, Corey. Yeah. And you gave me the name of somebody who makes the oil in pill form. And I got in touch with her. And because my mother couldn't stand the taste of anything, so I couldn't even get oil into her mouth, which I had been giving her a little bit before.
Right.
So the woman was so gracious to come all the way from out of town and bring the oil to me. And as soon as I got it, I went and took it to my mother, who was lying in bed, and 3 days had gone by with no water, no food, and I could see she was dying. It was obvious she was about to go. And I thought, well, we have a choice. We either take her to the hospital, they're going to put tubes down her throat, needles in her arms, give her all kinds of toxic medications, and I don't like the sound of that, but let's try the cannabis oil first. So I gave her a cap, which has 1/10 of a gram of the oil, and within 2 hours, she started saying, I'm thirsty, I want something to drink, and I'm hungry, I want something to eat, and she started eating and drinking again.
Wow.
But that's not the end of it. Because the doctors, of course, they wanted to continue doing every test under the sun because they wanted to know why this was happening to her. And they did a gastroscopy, and they discovered H. pylori bacteria in her gut. So they assumed, because of that bacteria, that she had a problem as a result of that. And I discovered afterwards that 60% of the population has this bacteria, and not everybody gets sick from it. So they prescribed 2 heavy-duty antibiotics and 2 stomach meds, and then, of course, the anti-nausea medication. And we started giving it to her because we didn't know. So, but I made sure she took that oil every night because I wanted her protected no matter what. And I knew the oil would protect her and help her because we saw what it did the day, we gave it to her.
Right.
And also it helped her sleep. She hasn't slept in years. And when we gave her that oil, she's out like a light for 8 hours solid. She doesn't even get up to go to the washroom. And that's what she needed to heal. So when we gave her the medication for the H. pylori, she very quickly got sicker and sicker. She started having seizures and blacking out, and we had to call the ambulance and have her taken into the hospital. And she was in emerge for 3 days, and the doctors, finally on the 3rd day, the doctors came out and said, okay, we're taking her off all the meds. We don't think it's the H. pylori. We think maybe her thyroid medication is off balance. And I said, and he had a whole team of doctors there while we were sitting with my mother, and he said, but if she has nausea, we can give her the anti-nausea medication. And I said to him and all the doctors, I said, no, the cannabis oil is working just fine for the nausea. I'm going to continue giving it to her. And the head of the team actually said to me, oh, okay, that's great. We can't give it to her, but you can, so keep giving it to her if you want to. And they even wrote it on her medical chart, which I was so happy about, that she was not to take any medication, only the cannabis oil.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's remarkable.
Great hospital in Toronto, Mount Sinai. It's wonderful. And so she finally came out of the hospital, and it's been a year recovery for her because while she got sick, she had atrophied quite a bit, got very weak and traumatized, I think, by the medicine that they gave her with the seizures and the blacking out. It was horrible. So, she's doing a lot better now. She has some short-term memory issues. They did discover she had some lesions in her brain indicating that she probably had a few mini strokes and didn't even know it. So they think it's a vascular dementia that's happening. But the oil, I think, is keeping her from going downhill any faster. I think that it's really slowing down that process for her.
How much oil is she having a day?
I give her every night the cap, 1/10 of a gram, so it's a lot. I think it's more than I take. But she does well with it.
Yeah, keeping in mind
problem.
that everybody has a different tolerance and everybody has a different amount of cannabinoid receptors. So.
Right. But I think what happened to her is that I think it was a nervous breakdown because she's had an immense amount of stress over the last 4 years and too many changes. She's 70, she's going to be 79 soon. And 4 years ago, her and my father, well, first of all, she went to a family reunion, and an old, very old childhood trauma of sexual abuse by a family member was triggered in her. And she just was not the same when she came back from that reunion. We could see that she had gone into some kind of a state, a traumatic state. And then shortly after that, like within 2 months after that, my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's, which totally freaked her out. And then they decided to sell the house. And while they went to Mexico while the house was being sold so that they didn't have to be in the house while people were coming in and out. And they were traumatized there by some timeshare sellers. So there was that. And then they came back from their trip. Then they had to move. And they moved into a condo after living in this beautiful house for 43 years. So that was a big loss for them. And then my mother retired a year later from work, so now they're in a condo and they're much more isolated. She's not seeing her friends as much, and she's terrified every day about my dad because he's getting weaker and weaker, and she's watching him decline, and it scares her. They've been together since they were 21.
Does your father take cannabis for his Parkinson's?
He does. He smokes. He's afraid to take the oil because of his balance issues. He's afraid if he gets up in the middle of the night, he might lose his balance and fall. So he doesn't take the oil, even though I'd love him to. But he does smoke a lot, and I think that helps him quite a bit too.
Yeah. Boy, there's a lot of issues in your family, Leslie.
Oh, yeah. But we're a hardy bunch. We have a lot of love in our family, so we support each other quite a bit. And I think that's the saving grace as well.
Well, I think it's fantastic that both your parents, elderly parents, take cannabis in whatever form. I mean, I think it's certainly, I mean, your father would probably be on medications now, or is he on medications?
Well, he is also on medication, and he doesn't like taking medications, so he actually put off taking it for a long time. But at a certain point, he decided to start taking the dopamine pharmaceuticals, and it did help slightly, but they only work for about 5 years or so, and so he's got another year or two before I think that's not going to really help him too much. But my father's actually been smoking cannabis since the 1950s. He discovered it when he was 15 years old, and he loved it, and he just has always used it. And I think it's been really good for him in his life because he's also had a lot of trauma and when he was a child. And I think it kept him from having, to take any kind of pharmaceuticals like antidepressants, things like that.
Leslie, I wonder about maybe trying your dad. I know he's got that whole issue with balance. Trying him with some CBD.
Yes, that's a good idea.
Because I spoke with Dr. Ethan Russo at a conference, I forget where, that I was speaking at. Who's a renowned neurologist, cannabis-friendly doctor, who actually knows a lot about cannabis. We interviewed him. At any rate, asked him about Parkinson's, and he said, Parkinson's is a real tough one. And what one person reacts to favorably, another doesn't. So it's not kind of like, with most cancers, we say high THC. So it's not like you look at Parkinson's and say, okay, well, they need 50-50 THC CBD. It's really all over the map. So, might be worth a try to get a decent CBD oil and just give it a whirl, see if it makes any difference.
Okay, great. I'm going to do that. Yeah. Thank you.
Is his condition deteriorating?
It is. It is deteriorating. He doesn't have the shakes, that he doesn't have that kind of a problem with the Parkinson's, but he's getting weaker and weaker and weaker all the time. And he's still walking, but he needs a walker if he's going more than a block. For sure, because he gets too tired and then he has to sit down. And it's getting harder for him to do things with his hands, like prepare the food, make meals, things like that. He gets tired very, very fast. So his movement is becoming less and less.
What's he like mentally? Do you find that he's not as cognitive as he used to be?
No, he's sharp. He's still
interesting.
Fortunate, thank goodness.
Because that's something that happens with Parkinson's as well.
It can, yes, but not with him. And I don't know. Maybe it's from all smoking for all these years too. That's protected him.
Maybe it's the marijuana.
I bet you it is. Because when we were young, sometimes he would be like, he'd start spinning out. And if he was out of cannabis, we'd say to my mom, go get him some weed, you know? He needs his weed.
God's sake.
Yeah.
And of course, I guess if your mother sees your father's condition deteriorating, it has an impact on her.
Yes, because she's terrified. They've been together. She's never been alone. She's been with him since she was 21.
Yeah.
And before that, she hadn't been alone too much either. She lived with roommates. But I think it'll be such a big change for her, you know, if he goes before her. So, yeah, every day she's scared and watching him, and it's very hard on her.
Well, what you do is get him some CBD, have him take the CBD, and tell him that you've entered him in the Toronto Marathon and see what his reaction is.
Yeah, definitely.
No, yeah. Does your sister use cannabis?
She does too. She's used it for years for anxiety and PTSD as well. Yeah, we've all been through the mill, so, and it works for her. There's times where she just couldn't get through her days without it.
Boy, you're one of the few people we've talked to whose entire family embraces cannabis. Isn't that right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, which is great.
It really is.
It's really nice,
Now,
really refreshing to hear.
Ironically, like, we have a younger brother, and my brother, even though cannabis had been in the family all these years, although my mother was never a smoker, she never was into cannabis until like we started giving it to her for medical reasons. But my brother never touched it until he was 40. And I think he was afraid. And then when he was 40, he said, well, I feel like, you know, everybody's doing it. I feel like I'm missing out on something. I want to know what it is. So he tried it. And he likes it, and it's been amazing for him too, because he also has PTSD. So the whole family is, is happy to have it. It's a godsend. It's a miracle plant. It's such an intelligent plant. I'm just totally blown away by it. And ever since I discovered the medicinal benefits, like 3 years ago, I've been doing a lot of research and learning as much as I can about the history of it. And I've been telling everyone I know who's open to hearing about it. And helping people who are sick to get their hands on some oil and get healed up.
Well, tell your younger brother the reason he waited until he was 40 is because he was adopted.
You'll have a good laugh after that.
Well, this is great. Some great stories you told us. I mean, great in the sense that they're informative about the use of cannabis, not the story itself about you being kidnapped.
Right. I
And,
understand.
But what it tells me is that there are so many more alternatives than the pharmaceutical paradigm will have us believe in. And cannabis seems to be, as you mentioned, Leslie, a very intelligent plant. And as we've mentioned on this show many times, it creates homeostasis in the body, which balances out our systems. And that's what makes it so remarkable. And I think your family is really a testament to the fact that cannabis can be so extremely helpful.
For so many things.
For so many things.
For so many things. It's amazing. It just blows my mind the more I learn about it, how many things it's good for. And then I was listening to Dr. Bob Melamede, and he's talking about how women naturally produce cannabinoids in their breast milk when they're feeding.
Yes.
That's great. Like, our bodies are meant to be using this plant. And it's sad. Like, it makes me really sad and very angry that these governments have prohibited us from having access to something that's never killed anybody ever and only helps people. And yet they want to push these, like, pharmaceuticals. I can't take any pharmaceuticals. I'm allergic to every antibiotic. Anytime I've taken any medicines from the doctor, I've gotten worse. So I have to rely on natural medicines. I will never take a pharmaceutical ever in my life, not even an over the counter. I will, unless I'm in a really terrible injury, accident, and I need some morphine for the short time, then I won't touch anything from them.
Leslie, it's wonderful to talk to you. Anything you want to say in conclusion?
I just want to say thank you very much for all the work you're doing. If it wasn't for you and Corey, I probably wouldn't have known as much as I know, and it's a really great plant. I'm happy to share my story just so that more people can know that they can benefit from it. And I guess that's it. Yeah.
Well, if it wasn't for Corey, I wouldn't know anything about cannabis either. So,
oh, thank you, Corey, so much.
Thank you, Corey.
You're welcome so much. And Leslie, thank you for stepping up to the plate and sharing your story, because I'm sure that it wasn't easy to do, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. You're welcome. I'm happy if it helps people. That's the main thing.
Thanks, Leslie. We appreciate it.
Yeah. Okay. Take care.
Thanks.
Nice talking
Bye.
with you.
Have a great day,
Bye.
Leslie. Bye-bye.
You too. Bye-bye.
That was episode 229 of Cannabis Health Radio, and we'd like to thank Ron Zahar of Rowan's Sound here in Victoria for generously donating his studio and his time for Cannabis Health Radio to be on the air. Corey, Leslie was a fantastic guest.
She was.
Great story.
Great story. Lots of courage took to tell it, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And very much appreciate it.
That's another edition of Cannabis Health Radio. We'll be back next week.
Thanks for listening to Cannabis Health Radio. For more information and to search previous podcasts, visit our website, cannabishealthradio.com. Subscribe so you don't miss new episodes. And follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. This podcast is made possible by donations from our listeners. If you found the information helpful, please consider making a donation in any amount through our website. You can also help us share our message by leaving a review on your podcast listening platform. We are very grateful for your support. Thank you.